You can spend 20 years in the world's most elite classrooms, master every single syllabus, graduate with highest honors, and still completely fail at life.
Oh, absolutely. It happens all the time.
Right. Because, as our deep dive today reveals, school is literally the only place where you get the lesson first and the test second. In the real world, the exam hits you before you even know what subject you're taking.
It is the ultimate paradox of how we prepare human beings for adulthood. Like, we spend the first quarter of our lives in these highly structured, totally predictable environments.
Yes, safe little bubbles.
Exactly. We're given textbooks that contain all the answers, formulas that, they always balance out, and grading rubrics that tell us exactly what to do to succeed.
Just check the boxes and you get an A.
Right. And then we are just thrown into a reality that is fundamentally chaotic, unscripted, and just entirely indifferent to our academic accolades.
Which is why we are pulling this apart today, because it affects every single one of you listening. We're diving into a set of source materials, primarily these really fascinating excerpts from a text called Beyond the Classroom, The Lifelong Blueprint for Resilience.
Such a good read.
It really is. And the core mission here for us today is to unpack this really jarring reality. The fact that formal education is brilliant at preparing us for exams, but it almost completely misses the mark on preparing us for the actual unpredictable test of living.
Well, think about the temporal difference between those two environments, right? An exam in a classroom lasts for, 2, maybe 3 hours?
Yeah, at most.
You sit at a desk, a clock ticks down on the wall, you hand in your paper, and the stress is over.
Boom, done.
Done. You get a grade, which is this clear, quantifiable metric of your worth in that specific vacuum, but life doesn't work on a bell schedule.
No, it definitely doesn't.
Life tests you every single day. There is no bell that rings to let you know the crisis is over.
Right. And the source material opens with this incredibly potent analogy about exactly that. It points out that life just hands you, say, a financial crisis or a sudden emotional loss or a devastating career rejection. It just says, figure it out.
Yeah, no study guide.
None.
Yeah.
You are stumbling through the dark, dealing with the pain and the confusion, and it is only after you survive the wreckage that you actually learn the lesson. You are forced to take the exam without ever seeing the material.
And this is where the text makes a really profound pivot. Because from childhood, we are conditioned to score well. We optimize for the grade, the degree, the entry-level job at the prestigious firm.
We're basically trained to be compliance machines.
Exactly. But very few of us are ever taught the mechanics of navigating profound uncertainty. We aren't taught how to handle the cognitive dissonance of doing everything right and still failing.
Which is such a hard pill to swallow.
It is, and we aren't taught how to shoulder the immense psychological weight of making life-altering decisions with, completely incomplete information.
So I want you, if you're listening right now, to just pause and reflect on your own journey for a second. Think about a massive real-world crisis you've faced, like a brutal breakup, a layoff, a moment where everything just sort of fell apart.
We've all had them.
Right. How many times have you felt like you spent your whole life studying for the wrong test? You have the resume, you have the intellect, but in that moment of crisis, you realize absolutely none of your textbooks covered how to survive this exact feeling.
It's a terrifying realization, and I think it exposes the great disconnect of our modern era. The source text argues that this disconnect is born from a societal over-reliance on pure intellect.
Like we just worship being smart.
We do. We treat intelligence as this impenetrable shield against adversity. But intelligence is just a tool, and if you are applying the wrong tool to a dynamic emotional problem, the results are catastrophic.
Wait, I'm struggling to buy that entirely. Let's really pressure test this. If someone has a 160 IQ, aren't they naturally going to be better at navigating a massive life crisis just by virtue of processing speed?
You would think so, right?
Doesn't raw brain power eventually win out? If you're smart enough, can't you just outthink the panic?
It's a very logical assumption, but it fundamentally misunderstands the neuroscience of human behavior under pressure.
Okay, unpack that for me.
So the source provides a clear synthesis on this. Academic intelligence is largely static. It is the ability to solve complex problems in a vacuum where all the variables are known.
Like a controlled experiment.
Exactly. If X equals this and Y equals that, find Z. But life is dynamic. Life doesn't ask you to solve a math problem in a perfectly quiet, air-conditioned room. It asks you to solve it while the room is actively on fire.
And while the people you love are screaming at you.
Yes. When you are facing a sudden financial downturn at your company or a terrifying medical diagnosis in your family,
Right.
your brain is no longer just crunching numbers.
Right, you're in survival mode.
You are dealing with a massive flood of cortisol and adrenaline. You are dealing with your own fear, the panic of the people around you, and a landscape that is shifting by the minute.
So the processing speed of your prefrontal cortex, like your logical brain, it just doesn't matter if your emotional brain has completely taken over the steering wheel.
Precisely. This is why the source emphasizes that a person can possess multiple advanced degrees, they can have off-the-charts academic intelligence, and yet still fundamentally fail at life.
Wow.
If they cannot manage their relationships, if they lack the emotional regulation to stay calm, or if they lack the self-discipline to execute a strategy under duress, I mean, their intellect becomes completely useless.
That is deeply unsettling, honestly, because it implies that everything we've been optimizing for, the grades, the specialized knowledge, is just a prerequisite.
It's the baseline.
Yeah, it's the key that gets you into the building. Your resume gets you the interview. But once you're inside the building, the metrics of survival completely change.
And the text notes that, conversely, there are countless individuals with very limited formal education who build extraordinary, highly stable lives.
Because they figure out the hidden rules.
Right. They didn't memorize the syllabus. Instead, they mastered practical resilience through sheer repetition in the real world. They developed the ability to read people, to adapt to rapidly changing environments, and to maintain discipline when motivation just totally evaporated.
So if we know that intellect and academic accolades aren't enough to actually sustain a successful life, why are we still so collectively obsessed with them?
That's a great question.
I think the answer is that we are completely addicted to the end result. We open our phones and we see a 22-year-old tech founder who just sold their company, and our brain falsely concludes that their sheer intellect got them there overnight.
Completely ignoring the decade of unseen behavioral discipline.
Exactly.
This is a critical psychological trap that the source material warns against. Traditional education gives us a false sense of how to succeed, but modern culture, specifically the digital landscape, gives us a deeply distorted timeline of when that success should happen.
Right, the whole instant gratification thing.
We are living in the illusion of instant achievement.
It's the comparison between the highlight reel and the blooper reel, isn't it? We are constantly consuming the luxury lifestyles, the award ceremonies, the Forbes 30 under 30 lists.
Oh, those lists are the worst for your mental health.
Seriously. But we are experiencing our own daily lives in raw, unedited form. We see our own messy drafts, and we compare them to everyone else's polished final product.
And the psychological danger there is profound. Social comparison theory tells us that we determine our own social and personal worth based on how we stack up against others.
Which is natural, right? We're social creatures.
It's natural, but when you are constantly bombarded with the final destinations of highly successful people, it creates a massive cognitive dissonance regarding your own progress.
Because you feel like you're failing, even if you're just in the middle of the process.
Exactly. The text points out that this causes deep discouragement because the unseen variables, the years of sacrifice, the sleepless nights, the crippling self-doubt, the endless rejection, they are entirely removed from the narrative you see online.
The source gives us an incredible historical example to ground this, and it's one that everyone listening knows. J.K. Rowling. We all know the end of the story, right?
The billion-dollar franchise.
Yeah, the theme parks, the cultural ubiquity of Harry Potter. But the text forces us to look at the timeline before the magic happened.
Her journey is a masterclass in the necessity of unseen struggle. I mean, before there was any external validation, there was an incredibly long period of severe financial hardship, profound personal challenges, and repeated demoralizing rejections from publishers.
Like a lot of rejections.
12. We are talking about someone who is living on state benefits, clinically depressed, and continually being told by industry experts that her work was essentially unmarketable.
When you hold a glossy hardcover of Harry Potter today, the book doesn't come with a warning label that says, this product required 5 years of poverty and being told no by 12 different publishing executives. You just see the triumph.
And what we really need to dissect here is why she kept going. The text argues that meaningful success requires countless hours of preparation and silent perseverance.
Because if she just wanted to get rich quick, she would have stopped.
Exactly. If her motivation had been purely extrinsic, if she just wanted the money or the fame, she would have quit after the third rejection. The feedback loop of the real world was telling her she was failing.
She had to rely entirely on intrinsic motivation, the internal belief that the work itself had value, regardless of whether the external world recognized it yet.
And that right there is the antidote to the instant success myth. Real life is remarkably unglamorous. It requires a tremendous tolerance for delayed gratification.
Which is so hard today.
It is. But the source insists that understanding this reality is crucial because it gives people the permission to be patient with their own journey.
So to you listening right now, if you are in the middle of a brutal grind, if you are putting in lonely hours of practice or building a business or trying to salvage a relationship, and you feel like you are failing because there is no immediate payoff, this text is validating your reality.
You're not doing it wrong because it's hard.
Right. Real life isn't a viral video. Meaningful architecture takes time to build.
But this requires a fundamental shift in how we perceive the obstacles along that timeline. If the road to any worthwhile destination is paved with years of unseen struggle, then you are inevitably going to experience massive ego-bruising failures.
Guaranteed.
And how you process those failures dictates whether you keep moving forward or whether you permanently derail.
Which brings us to a concept in the source text that completely shatters how we usually think about setbacks. The text states, failure is not the opposite of success. It is an essential part of it. Rejection is not a final verdict, but an invitation to improve.
Let's really linger on that because it directly contradicts the academic conditioning we discussed earlier.
Right. In school, failure is the end.
In a classroom, failure is terminal. You get an F on the test, the semester ends, and that permanent mark goes on your record. It means you are flawed. But the text argues that in the dynamic ecosystem of real life, failure is simply a mechanism for feedback. It is data collection.
To prove this, the source brings out what I like to call the Hall of Fame of rejection. And these aren't just minor stumbles. These are identity-crushing defeats.
Oh, absolutely brutal ones.
Walt Disney, right? A man whose literal legacy is human imagination was fired from a newspaper because his editor said he lacked imagination and had no good ideas.
Which is just hilarious in retrospect. And then you have Michael Jordan, universally recognized as one of the most obsessively competitive and dominant athletes in human history, getting cut from his high school varsity basketball team.
Or Thomas Edison conducted thousands upon thousands of unsuccessful experiments before finally stabilizing the incandescent light bulb.
And Steve Jobs, unceremoniously fired from Apple, the very company he co-founded, a company that was inextricably linked to his entire sense of self and public identity.
Okay, we know these stories. They are almost modern myths at this point. But I want to move past the surface-level motivation here.
Yeah.
How did they survive this? When Steve Jobs got fired from Apple, why didn't he just retreat to a beach somewhere, play the victim, and complain about how unfair corporate boards are for the rest of his life?
That is the exact right question to ask. And the difference lies in a psychological concept known as the locus of control.
Locus of control.
Yeah, so individuals who are easily crushed by failure usually possess an external locus of control. They believe that things happen to them. If they fail, it's because the system is rigged, the boss is unfair, or the world just doesn't understand their genius.
They externalize the blame to protect their ego.
Precisely. But the figures highlighted in the source text exhibited an intensely internal locus of control. They believed that they had agency over their ultimate outcomes, regardless of the immediate circumstances. They did not tie their core identity to a single failure.
This makes so much sense when you look at how Edison framed his journey. The source highlights his perspective, and it is just a brilliant reframing of cognitive dissonance. Edison didn't view his thousands of failed attempts as a reflection of his own inadequacy.
No, he famously said he hadn't failed. He had just found 10,000 ways that didn't work.
Which is wild.
He was utilizing the scientific method as a philosophy for daily life. In science, a negative result isn't a failure. It is a successful discovery of what not to do. It narrows the field of possibility. Edison separated his ego from the outcome.
And Jobs did the exact same thing. Being ousted from Apple could have been the end of his professional relevance. But because he had an internal locus of control, he viewed that period of exile as a new laboratory.
He didn't just give up.
No. He went out to fund Pixar. He founded NXT, which Apple eventually had to buy just to survive. And he used that incredibly painful chapter to acquire the exact skills and perspective he needed to return and lead Apple to become the most valuable company on Earth.
This completely re-engineers how we must view rejection. The text suggests that rejection is often the world's most aggressive filtering mechanism. It burns away the fragile egos and leaves only those who are willing to adapt and improve.
Think of it like a book. If life is a book, a massive failure is just a tough chapter, not the back cover. You just have to keep turning the page. But, okay, here's the problem. It is very easy for us to sit here with microphones and talk about the psychology of failure.
Sure.
It is very easy to say, treat failure as data. But when you actually lose your job or your business goes under or your spouse leaves you, reframing it as data doesn't stop the panic attacks. It doesn't pay your mortgage.
No, it certainly doesn't. Which brings us directly to the practical application of this philosophy. You cannot view failure as data if the failure physically, emotionally, or financially destroys you.
You have to actually survive the hit.
Exactly. You have to be strong enough to survive the impact. And that is why the source material transitions into what it calls the hidden curriculum.
The shock absorbers.
Yes. The text outlines 3 specific pillars of life preparation that formal education entirely ignores: emotional intelligence, financial responsibility, and physical and mental health.
These are the defensive mechanisms.
They are the foundation that allows you to endure the chaos without breaking.
Let's unpack these deeply, starting with emotional intelligence, or EQ, because the text bluntly states that life guarantees heartbreak, intense stress, and brutal disagreements.
To understand why EQ is vastly more important than IQ in a crisis, we really have to look at how the brain actually processes threat.
Okay, take us into the neuroscience.
So when you receive a terrifying email from your boss or your partner says something deeply hurtful, your brain's amygdala, the ancient emotional processing center, detects a threat.
It's like an alarm bell.
Exactly, and it doesn't care that it's just words on a screen or a vocal tone. It reacts as if a physical predator, like a tiger, is in the room.
The famous amygdala hijack.
Yes, your amygdala floods your system with stress hormones and literally bypasses your prefrontal cortex, which, as we discussed, is your logical, rational brain.
Which explains so much.
This is why incredibly smart people send disastrously dumb, angry emails at 2 in the morning. Their IQ is temporarily offline.
So emotional intelligence isn't just about being, nice or empathetic or having good vibes. It is the learned neurological ability to recognize that hijack happening in real time.
And consciously pausing long enough for your rational brain to boot back up.
Okay, I'm currently hijacked. I should step away from the keyboard.
Exactly. The source emphasizes that individuals who can respond calmly, rather than impulsively reacting to their immediate biochemical flood, are the ones who survive crises.
That makes total sense.
Furthermore, the text ties EQ directly to relationship building. Because when you do inevitably fall, it is the quality of your relationships, your family, your friends, your mentors, that forms the safety net.
You can't just solo mode through a massive disaster.
You cannot succeed alone, and you certainly cannot survive catastrophic failure alone.
Which feeds perfectly into the next pillar the source outlines, which is financial literacy. And I want to be careful here because when people hear financial responsibility, they immediately roll their eyes.
Oh yeah, they think of spreadsheets.
They think, yes, I know, I need a budget and I shouldn't buy a $5 latte. But the text is getting at something much deeper regarding personal autonomy, isn't it?
It really is. The text treats financial responsibility not as a path to buying luxury goods, but as a mechanism for buying resilience. It lists the practical habits, obviously avoiding unnecessary debt, saving, investing carefully.
The basics.
But the psychological insight here is fascinating. The source observes that earning a high income does not equal financial security. Many high-income earners are entirely fragile.
Because of lifestyle creep.
Yes, and a psychological phenomenon known as hyperbolic discounting.
Ooh, what's that?
Well, our human brains are evolutionarily wired to prefer immediate rewards over long-term security. We prefer the dopamine hit of the $100 spent today over the abstract concept of $150 saved for tomorrow.
So we just buy the car now.
Right. High-income earners often fall into the trap of aggressively expanding their lifestyle to match every promotion, leaving them with zero margin for error.
They have a massive cash flow, but they are living paycheck to paycheck on a luxury scale.
Which is incredibly stressful.
So if the industry shifts or they face an unexpected medical emergency, the whole facade just collapses.
Whereas the text points out that individuals with modest incomes who exercise relentless financial discipline, they build actual security. They understand that money isn't just a currency for consumption, it is a buffer against the world's chaos.
A safety net.
If you have 6 months of living expenses saved, a sudden job loss is, a highly stressful transition.
But it's not the end of the world.
Right. But if you have zero savings and maxed out credit cards, that same job loss is a life-threatening catastrophe.
You've built the financial shock absorbers so the pothole doesn't destroy the axle of the car. And that metaphor extends perfectly to the final pillar of this hidden curriculum: health, physical and mental well-being.
So crucial.
The text stresses that regular exercise, balanced nutrition, sufficient sleep, and stress management they're entirely non-negotiable.
Health is the foundational substrate upon which every other ambition rests. The source argues that you cannot maintain emotional intelligence and you cannot execute long-term financial discipline if your physical vessel is entirely depleted.
Okay, I have to interject here because this is where the theory always clashes with reality for me.
Hmm?
I'm reading this and I'm nodding along thinking, yes, sleep 8 hours, eat kale, hit the gym.
Sounds great on paper.
Right. But when my life actually gets chaotic, when there is a massive deadline at work or a family emergency, my health habits are the very first things I throw out the window.
Or as people do.
I am sleeping 4 hours, I am eating absolute garbage from a drive-through, and my stress is through the roof. Isn't it profoundly unrealistic to expect people to maintain perfect health habits during a real-world crisis?
That is a very common trap, but it completely misses the point the source is making. The goal is not to maintain absolute perfection during the crisis.
Ah.
The goal is to have built such a robust baseline of health before the crisis hits that you can absorb the physiological blow without completely breaking down.
Ah, okay. So it's about having a reservoir to draw from.
Exactly. When a crisis hits, your body is going to be flooded with cortisol. Your sleep architecture will likely suffer. Your allostatic load, the cumulative wear and tear on your biological systems is going to spike.
You're taking damage.
You are. And if you enter that crisis already sleep deprived, chronically inflamed from a terrible diet, and entirely sedentary, your biological systems will simply crash. You will get sick or you will experience a complete mental breakdown.
But if you've been putting in the reps during peacetime,
Then your body has the physiological resilience to withstand a week of poor sleep and high stress. The text is urging us to build these pillars: EQ, finance, health, not so we can be invincible, but so we are no longer fragile.
we're fortifying the castle before the siege begins.
Exactly.
And we really need to fortify it because, as the text pivots to explain, the ground beneath the castle is actively shifting. Even if you have mastered your emotions, your money, and your health, the external world refuses to stand still.
Which brings us to the mandate for constant adaptation.
The world is changing so fast right now.
The source highlights the breathtaking pace at which our modern reality is changing. You look at the explosion of artificial intelligence, the automation of complex cognitive tasks, rapid globalization.
Entire industries are just vanishing.
Industries that provided stable, lifelong careers for decades are simply gone, while completely foreign professions are emerging overnight.
Which forces us to adopt what the source calls the most valuable life skill in the modern era: the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. We touched on this at the beginning. The idea that true education actually begins after graduation.
It is a profound shift in identity. The source argues that if you tie your identity to a specific static skill, you are highly vulnerable.
Right.
If you say, I am a person who does X, and a machine suddenly learns to do X 1,000 times faster, your entire sense of worth collapses. But if your identity is, I am a person who learns, you are infinitely adaptable.
I really want to dig into the middle part of that cycle, the
Yes.
unlearn part.
Yeah.
Because learning a new skill is relatively straightforward, right? You watch a tutorial, you practice. But unlearning, that is incredibly painful.
It really is.
It requires you to take a framework or a skill that made you highly successful in the past and have the utter humility to admit, this doesn't work anymore, I have to let it go.
It is biologically and psychologically painful. Neurologically speaking, when you learn a skill and repeat it for years, you build thick, highly efficient neural pathways. Your brain automates the behavior to save energy.
So it literally becomes hardwired.
Yes. Unlearning requires neuroplasticity. It requires the physical pruning of those established synapses and the creation of entirely new, initially inefficient pathways. It feels clunky. It feels like you're getting worse before you get better.
It's like a software system.
Nah.
Unlearning isn't just downloading a new app onto your phone.
Yeah.
It is going into the deep legacy code of your brain's operating system and intentionally deleting the very algorithms that kept you safe and successful 5 years ago,
Yeah.
because those algorithms are now causing fatal bugs in the new environment.
That is a brilliant analogy, and it requires the complete suppression of EO. The text is explicit here. Those who depend solely on past knowledge, those who aggressively defend the old way of doing things because it protects their status, they are the ones who get left behind.
The source doesn't just leave this as an abstract concept either. It details practical habits to force this adaptation.
Right, like what to actually do.
Yeah, it recommends a ruthless diet, of reading across diverse subjects, intentionally acquiring new digital literacies, constantly refining how you communicate, and remaining deeply curious about global macro trends.
Because you cannot predict the future. The text acknowledges that uncertainty is the only constant. You don't know what AI will look like in 3 years.
Nobody does.
But by remaining voraciously curious, you train your pattern recognition systems to find the hidden opportunities within those shifting industries. History repeatedly proves that the individuals who accept the reality of change, rather than fighting to preserve the past, are the ones who transform societal upheaval into personal advancement.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground. We've talked about the illusion of instant success, the reframing of failure, the hidden curriculum of health and wealth, and the biological necessity of unlearning.
A lot of heavy concepts.
But there's a massive elephant in the room that we have to address. And to the immense credit of the source material, it doesn't shy away from this harsh reality.
The reality of the uneven playing field.
Yes. Because a listener could easily say, this is all great advice if you have the luxury of time and resources. But what if I am starting from a position of severe disadvantage? What if I'm trying to learn and adapt, but I'm doing it while working 3 minimum wage jobs just to survive?
It's the ultimate pushback, and the source is brutally honest about this. Life is not designed to be fair.
It's just not.
The text acknowledges that some people are born on third base. They begin their lives with immense financial security, access to elite networks, world-class education, and deeply supportive environments.
While others have to fight, bleed, and scratch for a single tiny opportunity. They start miles behind the starting line, weighed down by systemic hurdles, poverty, or traumatic childhoods.
It is an undeniable structural truth. However, the core argument the text makes is that while a severely unfair beginning is a monumental hurdle, it does not permanently dictate the final destination.
Right.
And it provides incredibly potent historical evidence of individuals who absorbed staggering amounts of unfairness and still reshaped the world.
The examples the source uses here are undeniable. Let's look at APJ Abdul Kalam.
Such an inspiring story.
He was born into a very humble, impoverished family. As a child, he literally sold newspapers on the street just to help his family survive. He had this burning dream to become a fighter pilot, and after years of struggle, he finally got the opportunity, only to be rejected. The door was just slammed in his face.
And he could have quit right there.
But he didn't. He adapted, channeled that intellect into aerospace engineering, and eventually became one of India's most revered scientists and the president of the nation.
And the text pairs his story with Oprah Winfrey, a woman who overcame profound poverty, severe childhood trauma, and systemic discrimination to build an unprecedented global media empire.
But the example that truly forces us to reckon with the concept of unfairness is Nelson Mandela.
Yes.
The source highlights him because his story represents the ultimate theft of time and justice. 27 years in prison. Think about the magnitude of that for a second. 27 years of your prime adult life stripped away by an unjust, brutally oppressive system.
What the text focuses on is not just the injustice he suffered, but the psychological alchemy of what happened when he was finally released.
Right.
It would have been completely understandable, perhaps even expected, for him to emerge from that prison consumed by a desire for vengeance.
I mean, if anyone had a justified right to play the victim, to burn the system down, it was him.
Exactly. But the text emphasizes that he chose a path of post-traumatic growth rather than post-traumatic bitterness. He emerged with a profound capacity for forgiveness and unparalleled moral leadership.
Because he realized the alternative was worse.
He recognized that if he held on to the bitterness, he would remain a prisoner forever.
So how do we deconstruct the mechanism of their success? Because it wasn't magic. It wasn't just, positive thinking.
No, it was a relentless focus on the only variable they could control, which was their own character. The text points out that none of these figures waited for perfect conditions.
Because they don't exist.
If Oprah or Mandela had waited for the world to become fair before they started working on themselves, they would have died waiting. Instead, they forged their character within the crucible of entirely imperfect, deeply unfair circumstances.
That is the defining pivot of the entire source text. It makes it unequivocally clear. Skills and intellect might generate your initial opportunities, but it is your character that determines if those opportunities endure.
We spend so much of our lives obsessing over the acquisition of hard skills. Coding, marketing, financial modeling.
The stuff that goes on the resume.
Exactly. But the source argues that foundational qualities like honesty, integrity, humility, resilience, and genuine kindness are the ultimate compounding assets. In a world full of highly intelligent, highly skilled people, trust and ethical behavior become the rarest and most valuable currency.
Because you can hire a smart person.
Yeah.
But if that smart person lacks integrity, they will eventually destroy your company from the inside out. A person with strong, unbreakable character builds lasting relationships and earns a level of respect that simply cannot be manufactured or bought.
It all comes back to locus of control. You cannot control your starting line. You cannot control the macroeconomic forces, the unfair biases of others, or the tragedies that will inevitably intersect with your life.
But you have absolute, uncompromising control over your response.
Always.
So to you, listening right now, this is where the theory becomes your reality. The text is deeply validating your struggle. Your circumstances might be wildly unfair. But the empowering truth is that you have the agency to alter your trajectory.
You do.
You do this one decision at a time, one habit at a time, one restrained emotional response at a time. The source challenges us to take ultimate, radical responsibility for our lives. Because blaming your circumstances, even when your blame is 100% justified, does not move you a single inch forward.
It is the ultimate choice between being a passive victim of your circumstances and being the active author of your response.
Well said.
The text concludes that the individuals who achieve deeply meaningful, lasting success are rarely the most naturally talented, and they are almost never the most fortunate. They are simply the ones who commit to lifelong learning, who anchor themselves in strong ethical values, and who fundamentally, stubbornly refuse to surrender when the world knocks them down.
That is an incredibly powerful place to land. We have extracted a massive blueprint today from this source material. We've seen that the unscripted reality of life will never guarantee you comfort, it will never promise certainty, and it certainly won't offer a predictable syllabus.
It definitely won't.
But it will consistently reward persistence. It will reward the hidden curriculum of emotional and financial discipline, and it will honor the sheer courage it takes to unlearn the past and rise after a failure.
And as we bring this deep dive to a close, I want to leave you with a final provocative consideration drawn directly from the concluding philosophy of the text.
Give it to us.
It demands that we completely reevaluate the metric by which we measure success. The ultimate validation of a life well lived is not the prestigious degrees mounted on your wall, the awards you've accumulated, or the zeros in your bank account.
None of that lasts.
It is the positive impact you have left on other human beings. It is the grace with which you handled the obstacles meant to destroy you, and the legacy of resilience you leave behind.
So I want you to think back to that classroom analogy we started with at the very beginning of this hour. That deeply comforting expectation of studying for a neat, predictable test. Now look at the actual life you are living today. This beautiful, chaotic, unscripted, highly unfair, and magnificent reality.
It's all of those things.
The text leaves us with a profound question that you must ask yourself when you evaluate your daily habits. Are the actions you are taking today merely preparing you to pass the next temporary superficial exam? Or are they building an unshakable legacy of character and resilience that will protect and inspire the people around you long after your own test is over?
It fundamentally shifts the focus from self-preservation to lasting impact, because it's not about whether you feel ready for what's coming. The chaos of life is going to happen regardless of your preparation.
It's coming either way.
The only question that matters is who you are choosing to become in the process.
Exactly. The syllabus is gone. The book is yours to write. Keep turning the page. Until next time, keep digging deep.